Hey everyone, it's your guy here, back with another no bullshit take on what's really shaking up the global order. And today we are talking about something that quietly, brutally rewrote a 25-year-old world record right under our noses. In 2025, the Japanese auto industry lost its crown as the world's #1 in global sales. That throne. Now, occupied by Chinese automakers, this isn't some minor stat shuffle. This is the kind of seismic shift that changes how entire industries think, invest, and plan for the next decade. Now, let's get the numbers straight, 25 million versus 27 million. That's the headline from the Nikkei themselves. Japan's own financial press, not some Chinese mouthpiece. The gap doesn't look huge on paper, but it's never about the gap itself. It's about the fact that Japan had held that #1 spot for a quarter of a century. 25 years, that means an entire generation of engineering logic, supply chain habits, brand premium perception, and even the buying decisions of multiple generations of consumers around the globe, all built on one rock-solid assumption: Japan makes the best cars, period. That assumption, gone, reordered, rewritten. And here's the kicker that should really grab your attention. This shift isn't happening in some niche market or just in Southeast Asia or Africa. This is a global synchronized earthquake. We're not talking about a blip on the radar. We're talking about a tectonic plate shift in how the world moves, manufactures, and consumes. You can feel it in the boardrooms of Detroit, in the engineering labs of Stuttgart, and yes, even in the quiet corridors of Toyota City. And why does global synchronized matter so damn much? Because for decades, Japan's dominance wasn't just about sales numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about presence, that inescapable, omnipresent feeling that wherever you went on this planet, Japanese cars were there. Go to North America and you're drowning in Toyotas, Hondas, Lexuses. They're in your driveway, your neighbor's driveway, your boss's driveway. Go to Europe. And while they may not beat the Germans in prestige, their hybrids are everywhere. Silent, efficient, reliable. Go to Southeast Asia and it's basically Japan's backyard. You can't throw a rock without hitting a Toyota dealership. Go to Australia, to the Middle East, to South America. Same story. That level of ubiquity was once a dream for Chinese automakers. They looked at that global footprint the way a rookie looks at a championship ring. Now that dream is rapidly becoming their reality. You can't drive down a freeway in California without seeing a Tesla, sure. But you're also starting to see BYDs and Geelys pop up in places you had never expect: parking lots, rental fleets, even government motor pools. The landscape is changing, and it's changing at warp speed. Let's zoom out to the big picture first. Because context matters, global auto sales are pushing 96 million units, up about 5% year over year. Out of that 96 million, China alone accounts for more than 34 million. Let that sink in for a second. That means for every 3 cars sold on Earth, 1 is transacted in China, not in the United States, not in Europe, not in Japan, in China. And that 34 million grew at 9%, way faster than the global average. That's not just growth. That's acceleration, translation. The engine of global auto growth is no longer in the US, Europe, or Japan. The center of gravity has shifted and it's not coming back. And that shift matters more than any single sales number, because once the growth engine moves, the entire rulebook gets shredded, thrown out the window, and set on fire. It's not about who runs faster anymore. It's that the track itself has been replaced. We Americans love to think we're the center of the automotive universe with Detroit and Silicon Valley, but the data doesn't lie. The real action is happening on the other side of the Pacific, and we're all just living in its wake. Now, let's dig into the real heart pounder, the global top 10 auto groups in 2025. This is where the rubber meets the road. Literally 3 Chinese players crashed the party in a big way. BYD moved 4,602,000 units, ranking 6th, up 1 spot from the year before. And get this, their pure EV sales overtook Tesla for the first time, becoming the global EV sales king. Did you catch that? Elon Musk, the guy who tweets about everything from Dogecoin to colonizing Mars, barely tweeted about its silence. That tells you everything you need to know. But the entire Silicon Valley EV circle was buzzing. You know, it's serious when the engineers at Palo Alto start losing sleep. SAIC, 4,508,000 units, 7th. Geely, 4,116,000, 9th. Their first time ever in the top 10. And they didn't just squeak in like a wild card team. They beat Honda, the brand you grew up with, the brand your dad probably swore by, the brand that defined reliability for generations of American drivers. crushed under Gila's wheels. If you stretch to the global top 20, the Chinese contingent takes 6 spots: BYD, Seiki, Geely, Chery, Chang'an, Great Wall. A tiered global competition structure is now a living, breathing fact. Japan. Only 5 in the top 20, outnumbered, outmaneuvered, outclassed. This isn't a friendly game of musical chairs. This is a hostile takeover, and the Japanese are still looking for their seats. And inside Japan's own camp, a slow-motion implosion, not a dramatic collapse with fireworks and explosions, but something more insidious. A creeping decay that eats away at the foundation. Honda's sales dropped 7.5%, and they even warned of their first annual net loss since going public in 1957. How much? 690 billion yen, which is roughly $4.6 billion. That's not pocket change. That's an existential crisis. Think about that. Honda, the company that built the Civic, the Accord, the NSX, the brand that defined an entire generation of affordable performance, is now bleeding money. Nissan dropped out of the global top 10 for the first time since 2004. The company that brought us the GTR, the Z car, the brand that challenged the Europeans and won. Now watching from the sidelines, Toyota, yes, still holds the single brand crown with 11,320,000 units, but their latest net profit. Down 26%, that's more than a quarter of their profitability, gone in a single year. You can see it, the once solid Japanese block is now cracking, and the cracks are widening into canyons. Don't bother memorizing whether BYD did 4,000,006 or 4,000,005. Just remember 3 Chinese names in the top 10, and each one is pushing a traditional Japanese giant down the ladder. Step by humiliating step, it's like watching the Roman Empire fall, but with better gas mileage and fewer barbarians, except the barbarians are now building the chariots. Now, let's tackle the deeper question that nobody seems to be asking. How did Japan get here? Did they really screw up that badly? Or is this just a temporary hiccup? Rewind to 2005, the peak of Japanese automotive power. Toyota was unstoppable, a juggernaut that seemed to have no weaknesses. Honda was flying high, the darling of enthusiasts everywhere. Nissan was conquering the world with their Renault alliance, shaking up segments left and right, and Chinese automakers, we were still using old Mitsubishi engines, proud of joint ventures, making importing foreign tech our highest strategic priority. Japanese media even mocked that China couldn't catch up in engines in 10 years. They laughed openly at the idea. Back then, you couldn't argue. It was like watching a high school JV team go up against the New England Patriots in their prime. The gap wasn't just wide, it was a chasm. But here's the twist that makes this whole story so deliciously ironic. Japan's problem is that they succeeded too much. Because they won, they believed their path was the only path. Because they won, they grew suspicious of any disruptive change. Because they won. Their entire system optimized for not making mistakes instead of daring to break through. This is the classic innovator's dilemma that every business school professor loves to talk about. Market leaders aren't beaten by challengers. They're trapped by their own obsession with the right way. Akio Toyoda, the man at the helm, genuinely believed hybrids were the pragmatic route. Hydrogen the ultimate solution, and EVs just a stopgap, a temporary fad that would fade away. Technically, he wasn't wrong about the engineering trade-offs, but markets don't care about technical truth. They care about trends, momentum, and consumer adoption curves. When China used subsidies, infrastructure investment, and supply chain muscle to pave the EV highway from coast to coast, Japanese automakers were still debating data in their labs, running simulations, waiting for more evidence. It's like having a treasure map but refusing to dig because you're not sure the shovel is the right tool. Now, look at the EV battlefield with clear eyes. The numbers are absolutely brutal. According to Marklines, Chinese companies captured 59% of the global EV market in 2025. Japan, 3%, 59 versus 3. That's not a contest, that's a rout, a complete, total, and utter demolition. You see green plate cars in China every day, on every street, in every parking lot, but in Tokyo, finding a public charger is harder than finding a 24-hour convenience store. And that's saying something in a country famous for its convenience stores. Japan's EV penetration has been stuck around 3% for years, while China's has blown past 60%. In the first week of December 2025, new energy vehicle penetration hit 62.2%. And in that same month, the top 10 passenger car sales in China, all new energy, not a single gas-powered car in the top 10. Imagine going to a dealership in the US and not seeing a single internal combustion engine. That's the reality in China right now. It's not just a trend, it's a complete transformation. But if you think that's the whole story, China bet on EVs, Japan stuck to gas, so they lost. You're missing the real masterpiece. Because the most devastating blow came on a different battlefield entirely, the internal combustion engine. You might ask, in the EV era, does that even matter? Yes, and massively. Because 60 to 70% of the world's cars are still gas or hybrids, and that market won't vanish overnight. It's going to be with us for at least another decade or two. Whoever pushes combustion efficiency to the absolute limit will keep grabbing share in that massive lucrative market. Japan knew this, so Toyota spent over 2 decades grinding their hybrid engine thermal efficiency from 37% in the first Prius all the way to 41%. The industry ceiling, they didn't stop there then. In June 2026, Toyota's 6th generation THS system hit mass production with 44.5% thermal efficiency. What does that mean in plain English? In industry math, each 1% gain in thermal efficiency cuts fuel consumption by 2.5%. That new powertrain could push a family car under 4 liters. Per 100 kilometers, a 50-liter tank, good for 1,200 kilometers 5 years ago. Any car maker on the planet would applaud that. It's like hitting a 95 mile per H, our fastball, impressive, elite, world class. But here's the drama that makes this story worth telling. Right when Toyota dropped their ultimate engine, China delivered a dimensionality reduction strike that came out of nowhere. That same month, Chery announced their Kunpengting hybrid engine hit 48.57%, global number 1. Not just better, but significantly better. Geely followed with 48.41%, and they're 2.22 liters. Per 100 kilometers set a Guinness World Record, actual verified official world record. BYD and Changan were also breaking through in the 44 to 46% range, all clustered at the top. Toyota's 44.5, just announced with great fanfare and already relegated to second tier within weeks. Do you know what that means? The industry's long-held physics limit for gasoline engines was around 45%, a number that engineers had accepted as a natural barrier. Toyota stood at that edge, proud and accomplished. But Chinese automakers didn't just approach it, they jumped over it like it wasn't even there. It's like you run a 100-meter world record and your opponent just flies over your head on a jetpack. Don't bother with 48.57 versus 48.41. Just remember, Toyota's freshly minted production record didn't even last a month. Their last moat, their final technological fortress, has been filled in, paved over, and turned into a highway for their competitors. That's not just competition, that's humiliation on a global scale. So how did China's thermal efficiency leapfrog Japan so fast? I'll tell you, it's not just about working harder, though they certainly do that. The route is a completely different rulebook. A whole new way of thinking about what an engine is supposed to do. Toyota's THS hybrid logic is oil first. Their engine handles everything: stable idle, low-end torque, high-speed endurance, climbing power. It's like training a decathlete who can't have any weaknesses. All the constraints that limit efficiency are strapped to him. He's got to run, jump, throw, swim, everything. But China's hybrid approach, electric first from the very beginning, the engine mostly does one thing and one thing only: generate power in its most efficient RPM range, or direct drive at highway speeds. Starting, accelerating, low speed crawling, all handled by the electric motor. So the engine doesn't have to be a decathlete, it just needs to be a 100-meter sprint specialist, pouring all its energy into that single explosive burst. The old constraints, idle fuel consumption, low torque variable conditions, all lifted by the motor. The engine, now light and free, can push expansion ratios to the absolute limit, maximize EGR rates, and minimize cooling losses. It's like comparing a Swiss Army knife to a scalpel. Both are useful, but one is specifically designed to cut through anything with surgical precision. Chery's Kunpengting, that's exactly how it hit 48.57. Not by grinding away millimeter by millimeter, but by redefining what an engine should even do in the first place. It's that sprint specialist wasting zero energy on anything else. Geely went even further. They swapped technical routes entirely. They shoved an AI large model into their hybrid control system. Their Shinrui AI cloud power can sense temperature, altitude, and road conditions in real time, dynamically tweaking injection and ignition timing to keep the engine locked at peak efficiency no matter what. Japan builds hybrids by polishing mechanical precision to a mirror finish. Hundredths of a millimeter, thousandths of a gram. China builds hybrids through an integrated system of electric drive, algorithms, and software, a holistic approach that treats the car as one unified system rather than a collection of separate parts. This isn't a battle of technical levels. It's a clash of two completely different worldviews. Geely's CEO said it bluntly: with no diplomatic filter, we are going to completely overturn Japanese traditional hybrid technology. When I first heard that, I thought, wow, that's bold, that's arrogant. But after checking the data, I realized he wasn't shouting slogans. He was stating a fact that's already happened. You don't need to remember the numbers. Just know that the physical chains that once bound engine efficiency have all been unlocked by a completely different way of thinking. That's not innovation, that's revolution. Now you might ask, why don't Japanese automakers just pivot to an electric-first hybrid? Why cling to the decathlete route like it's the only way? Simple path dependency and totally different market conditions. China's auto market today is best summed up in one word: involution. A brutal, relentless, high-stakes competition where everyone fights tooth and nail for every inch of market share. Over a dozen major automakers are all piling into hybrids and EVs, each trying to outspec the other. You hit 45%, I hit 46% tomorrow. He threatens 48% the day after. No one dare slow down, because slowing down means dropping out. And dropping out means bankruptcy. This hyper-competitive pressure forces the entire supply chain to iterate at breakneck speed, from high-pressure fuel pumps to sensors to control chips, all with mature domestic suppliers that can scale up overnight. Research and development and production costs drop rapidly, and iteration speed is at least twice as fast as Japan's. It's like the difference between a startup culture where every day is a fight for survival and a corporate behemoth where everyone's just punching the clock and waiting for retirement. Let me give you some hard numbers that really put this in perspective. In 2025, BYD's research and development spending hit 63.4 billion yuan. That's roughly 8.7 billion US dollars at current exchange rates, or over $23 million a day. Let that sink in: $23 million every single day just on research and development. That's the kind of money that builds moonshots. Geely poured 17.6 billion yuan, about $2.4 billion. Up 29% from the previous year, Great Wall put in 10.4 billion yuan, roughly $1.4 billion, up 12%. Multiply those numbers over 5 years, and that's China's tech war chest, a massive accumulated arsenal of intellectual property and engineering talent. Japan, with just Toyota, Honda, Nissan, they all upgrade in sleepy consensus, like they've got an unspoken understanding not to rock the boat, no barbarians at the gate. So they coast. The whole supply chain optimizes for stability, reliability, and low cost. No one has any real incentive to make disruptive breakthroughs. When the world pivoted to EVs, Japanese execs were still debating whether EVs could ever replace hybrids. They wasted years arguing, years that China used to build factories, train engineers, and lock down supply chains. By the time they finally decided, China's battery factories, charging networks, and research and development centers were already nationwide, fully operational and scaling up. The former head of the Japan Automobile Manufacturers Association openly warned Akio Toyoda that Japan's auto industry was in crisis. And he wasn't exaggerating. It's like watching a turtle race a hare. But the hare never took a nap. It just kept running and running and running. According to Reuters, BYD and Geely have expressed serious interest in acquiring Nissan's Mexican plant. Think about that for a moment. Chinese companies buying Japanese factories in Mexico, right on America's doorstep, with direct access to the US market through USMCA trade agreements. That's not just competition. That's strategic encirclement. Ernst & Young reported that the US auto and parts imports from China hit 22 billion euros, about $24 billion, up 8% from 2024, while EU exports to China in the same category plunged 34%. That's a massive swing in trade flows. At this rate, by 2026, German-Chinese auto trade will be balanced, meaning Germany used to make a killing selling BMWs, Mercedes, and Audis to China. Now China can make the same killing selling BYDs, Geelys, and Cherys to Germany. The wind has turned, and it's turned completely. It's not just a trade imbalance anymore. It's a trade reversal. And the Germans are feeling it just as much as the Japanese. Now, in this giant reversal, there's one player that's especially underrated, a dark horse that deserves way more attention than it gets. It's not BYD. Not Geely, not Nio, Xpeng, or Li Auto, it's Chery. Chery is the classic silent accumulator, the one that grinds away quietly while everyone else is making noise. You might not see many on us streets, and you probably haven't heard your neighbor talk about one. But they've been China's #1 auto exporter for 23 consecutive years. 23 years. That's not a flash in the pan. That's a generation of consistent, disciplined execution. In 2025, Chery sold 2,806,000 vehicles, with 1,344,000 exported. Up 17.4%, total exports exceeding 5,850,000. That means every 23 seconds, a Chery rolls off a dock overseas somewhere in the world. In December 2025 alone, they exported over 140,000 units, a single-month record for any Chinese automaker ever. But what fascinates me isn't just the volume, it's the model. Chery went global the old school way, the Japanese way, ironically, sell globally, build factories locally, produce locally, diversify markets, and even supply technology externally to other manufacturers. Sound familiar? That's the exact playbook Toyota. Honda and Mitsubishi used to conquer the world in the 1970s and 80s. They're not reinventing the wheel, they're just building a better one and selling it everywhere, using the same tactics that made Japan dominant in the first place. Chery beat the Japanese at their own game, on their own turf, with their own playbook. Here's a mind bender that really illustrates how far things have come. Back in 2015, Japan's Kawasaki Heavy Industries bought 7,000 Chery engines in one go. A Japanese company buying Chinese engines, could you have imagined that 10 years ago? 20 years ago? That would have been laughed out of any boardroom today. Chery engines are exported to over 80 countries, with cumulative exports exceeding 1.2 million units. They're not just selling finished cars, they're selling the core technology. And with that 48.57% Kunping Teen engine, Chery is no longer that little reverse engineering startup that copied other people's designs. They jumped to number 233 on the Fortune Global 500, leaping 152 spots in 1 year. The fastest rising auto company in the world, bar none. Don't count how many engines they exported. Just remember, a Chinese company. Using the Japanese playbook, beat the Japanese in their proudest domain, and they've been doing it for 23 years. That's not luck. That's a systematic, patient, and methodical dismantling of an empire. One more angle that often gets overlooked in all this noise. The underlying logic of China's auto-rise policy consistency. Back in 2001, China launched the 863 program for electric vehicles. At the time, even industry insiders thought EVs were a pipe dream, a distant fantasy that wouldn't materialize for decades. But China kept pouring money, policy support, and infrastructure investment into that path for over 2 decades. Through multiple economic cycles and industrial turmoil, never wavering, never flip-flopping, that kind of long cycle. High investment, no flip-flop strategic resolve is rare. Japan flip-flopped between hybrids and hydrogen, never fully committing to either. The US bounced between electrification and autonomy with policy changes every election cycle. Europe oscillated between diesel and electric, driven more by regulation than vision. China put their cards on the table from day one, electrification, all in, no hedging. And the result, a full industrial chain with no glaring weak spots. From lithium mining to battery production, from motor research and development to control systems, from charging infrastructure to recycling, in normal times. That means massive cost advantages in supply crunches. It means resilience and self-sufficiency. During the 2021 global chip shortage, Chinese automakers responded faster and more effectively than many global giants. Precisely because of that vertical integration and domestic supply chain. It's like having your own oil well while everyone else is fighting over gas stations during a hurricane. So here's the core of the whole story, the part that really matters. This isn't about who sells more cars in a given year. This is about the rules of the game being rewritten in real time. Right in front of our eyes, in the old rulebook, technical advantages held for 10, 20 years, engines ground up millimeter by millimeter, brands stacked layer by layer, channels expanded slowly and methodically, and newcomers had almost no chance of breaking in. In the new rulebook, technology shifts at warp speed. Supply chain capability outweighs brand heritage, and iteration speed decides everything. Toyota perfected the internal combustion engine, pushed it to its absolute theoretical limit, only to find the market no longer rewards that perfection. Not because they did it wrong, but because the audience moved to a different stage, a different show entirely. Akio Toyoda says he feels lonely, like he's the only one left who loves the smell and sound of an engine. I get that loneliness, I understand the passion. But business doesn't shed tears for passion. When the new Trio electric drive algorithms, software replaces the old Trio engine. Transmission, chassis, when China's saturated cutthroat competition meets Japan's sleepy, consensus-driven slow upgrade. The outcome was written 5 years ago. This isn't just a defeat, it's an obsolescence. Now, we have to be honest about the full picture, because no story is complete without the warts. Chinese automakers have scale and volume, no doubt about that. They've conquered the mountain of sales, but profitability still lags significantly behind the Japanese giants. In 2025, Toyota's net profit per volt vehicle was roughly 17,000 yuan, about $2,350. BYD was about 6,900 yuan, around $950. Geely about 4,700 yuan, roughly $650. Selling more doesn't mean earning more. Brand premium, chassis tuning, ride refinement, steering feel, Nevada H levels, those mechanical and sensory fundamentals take time to develop. They can't be rushed with money alone. It's like the difference between selling millions of hamburgers versus selling 100 prime steaks. Volume doesn't always equal value, and reputation is earned in inches over decades. But the direction and the path are now crystal clear. We're not just catching up, we're redefining the track entirely. And when the rules change, the most endangered players aren't the laggards. They're the ones who perfected the old rules. Because they'll be the absolute last to realize the game is over, they're still playing chess while everyone else has moved on to three-dimensional holographic poker. So I want to ask you, my American audience, because this affects us too, do you think China's auto victory over Japan is fully deserved? Or do you see hidden worries that could trip them up? Can Japan stage a comeback? Or is this the beginning of their long decline? Are we in the US next on the hit list with our own auto industry still finding its footing in the EV transition? Drop your take in the comments below. I want to hear what you think, because this isn't just about cars. It's about who writes the rules for the next generation of industry, trade, and global economic power. It's about strategy, about vision, and about whether old giants can learn new tricks before it's too late. All right, that's it for this one. See you next time. Stay sharp, stay honest, and never stop asking who's really writing the rules.